Hi and welcome to another gaming video, and in today's video I want to talk about Nintendo DSi Macros, making a Game Boy Macro using a DSi or a DSi XL. And if you don't know what a Game Boy Macro is, well, I love them, but it's where you take a DS and you take off the top screen and you basically use it as a fancy Game Boy Advance. I am a huge fan of macros, even though I'm not really a big fan of the Game Boy Advance. I like making these macros, and I've made quite a few Game Boy macros out of DS Lites, which is the best way to do it. I've made a Macro XL, which is out of an original DS, but I have seen a few people making them out of DSi's and DSi's XLs. And that's fine. If you've got a broken top screen on your DSi and you don't really know what else to do with it, you could turn it into a macro. But there's one glaring omission here. The DSi and the DSi XL don't have Game Boy Advance slots. Nintendo got rid of that with the DSi, and the main point of a Game Boy Macro, making it out of a DS Lite or even an original DS, is it's got a Game Boy Advance cartridge slot. And the term Game Boy Macro comes from, it's like a bigger Game Boy Micro, which was the official mini Game Boy Advance that Nintendo brought out. Wasn't very popular, quite expensive to get, but you can make a Game Boy Macro out of a DS Lite. It will be a single screen Game Boy Advance with the lovely crystal clear screen that you get on a DS Lite, and I just cannot see why anyone would need to make one out of a DSi, because it doesn't have that slot too. It doesn't have that Game Boy Advance slot. I suppose one bonus of using a DSi or a DSi XL is that it's got its own software, so you can run custom firmware on it, whereas a DS and DS Lite, you needed to use a flash card if you wanted to sort of put ROMs or emulate on it. So you could run emulators and put your ROMs directly on a DSi and a DSi XL and run it that way, like if you were doing a DSi macro. But you would have to make sure that anything was displayed on the bottom screen. And from my experience of things like Lane Boy, which is the Game Boy emulator, and other things, they tend to try and use both screens. At least with a macro made from a DS Lite or an original DS, and you pop in a Game Boy Advance cartridge, you can tell it to use the bottom screen and you never need to use the top screen. So DSi's and DSi XL macros look cool. I loved playing Game Boy games on a DSi XL because of that really large sort of form factor, the big screens, IPS displays, and it made Game Boy and Game Boy Color games look amazing. And I've seen a few people do it online. There's a fellow YouTuber called Jake Simmons. He's made a macro out of a DSi and a DSi XL, and they look fantastic. But I just think the fact that they've got no Game Boy Advance slot really takes away the whole meaning of a macro. You've got a DS, and like most people say online, please don't butcher a fully working DS or DS Lite. Most original DSs these days have got broken hinges because the plastic on them is so fragile. So that's a great way of using whatever you've got left, this bottom half of an original DS. And the same with DS Lite. You get a lot of them with snapped hinges or damaged top screens, and turning those into macros or macro XLs, and giving it a new lease of life as a fancy Game Boy Advance device is a great way of doing it. But please don't butcher a fully working machine. A lot of these just repurpose them as consoles that most people would chuck in the bin because the hinges are broken. But anyway, DSi XL macros, they look cool. It's a cool idea, but I think it just misses the point. It's got no Game Boy Advance slot, so yeah. I'm now off to make another Game Boy Macro out of the DS Lite. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.